Hello everyone, welcome to Models and Trains. In today's video I want to feature the Bedford KMs that Blue Circle used and one Dodge, just as an example. So we'll zoom down. So here we are. These are the bolt tippers that the company used quite extensively. There are quite a few of these in their fleet. Here's my model of it. Not a very good photograph, but there we are. Anyway, I've tried to include as much detail as possible and copy the exact tipper body or how it was constructed. Now then, here's my model of it up on my turntable. These cabs are almost impossible to find. You can buy the normal Bedford TK, which is a different cab configuration. These have twin bumpers and wider wheel arches because the axles were wider on these than on a TK. These were 16-ton gross vehicles, so the heavier front axle. However, to make an accurate model, you need the accurate model parts. So I searched and searched, and one day I came across a gentleman in Australia. So I'll just show you this. So Bedford circa 1974 to 79. They were made before that. But anyway, the cab was commissioned from Australia. And what happened, I found, purely by accident, a gentleman in Australia who had been making these Bedford KM cabs. So I contacted him and asked him if he had any, and he said no, he'd stopped making them. He'd moved on to other vehicles. So I explained to him that I was trying to recreate the Bedford KM models, and he said okay. So he made me 6. Very kind of him. I wouldn't be able to recreate these models that well without these cabs. So when I mentioned in my previous videos about Langley models, all the cabs I bought from Langley models come in a kit like this. Some of them have glazing, but not many. This one obviously didn't. I had to make my own. But again, these are white metal kits that you have to assemble, and obviously they need touching up with files and some bit of smoothing to paint them. But I'm very happy with how he made them and how they turned out. Now, as you can see, there's a headboard which didn't come with the cab, but I made that from plastic card. That's no problem. The decals come from Langley models, and this one is shown with a hydraulic ram with the tank tilted, as they would have been when they were discharging the load. Pressure was built up inside the tank to 15 psi, and the discharge valves opened, and then the cement was blown into silos. So that's the bolt tipper. So we move that to one side. Now then, let's turn the page over. Here we have Bedford KM. This would have been 1978, with what they call a demountable body. These were made by Ray Smith of Peterborough, and the idea was that the body could be dropped off, and then, for example, if you'd been on a delivery, when you came back to the depot, there was a loaded body waiting, or bodies. So basically you dropped off the empty body, picked up a loaded body, and off you went again to save time. So here's my model of that, with a bit of a crude load on it. I've since modified that. So here we see the cab again, the cab from Australia. And there we can see a picture of it with the body off, but I'll explain more about that. So let's go to these were the original KM Bedfords before the demountable bodies. These were just flatbed 16-ton gross, so these could carry 10 tons easily. There we go. So this would have been about 1974, something like that. So now I'll go on to the next model, which will be with the demountable body. Okay, so here's my model Bedford KM with the demountable body. And what I'm doing, I'm including this Dodge 100 Commando because I'd have to make a completely separate video. So I'll include it because it has the same drop body as used by the Bedford. So it could be picked up by either vehicle, the demountable body. So I'll show you in sequence how to unload them. So the first step in driving from under the demountable body was to undo two twist locks at the rear, similar to a container locking system. And then you had two hydraulic rams. And when you operated the rams, the rear of the body would lift up. And then if you see the legs, those would be lowered down on a series of holes with pegs. So you could lock the leg in this downward position. And that goes for the same as I'm showing on the Dodge there. And then the next step would be to drive forward to the next stage. Actually, no. The next stage would be to lower the hydraulic rams. I've got to get it right. And that would make the chassis available to be able to be driven forwards. So we've driven forwards until we come to the end of the chassis where the front legs would be lowered down. So here we are now. We're ready to operate the hydraulic rams again to lift the front of the body up and then lower down the front legs of the body. I did a better job making the front legs on the Dodge body. You can't see them, but they're there. I'll show you now. So once the front legs had been lowered down, they were secured with a spring-loaded pin. On the again, the front hydraulics, I'll get it right one day, the hydraulics would lift the front of the body up. You could lower the legs down, secure them with the spring-loaded pin, and then lower again the hydraulic rams so that the body was on the ground. Now you can see I made the front legs a bit finer on the Dodge. Now then, we'll show you them with the fully removed. So there we are. That's the cabin chassis fully removed from under the demountable body. Now if you look on the Dodge, it's clear on the Dodge, you can see the ramps right at the end. Now underneath the bodies at the front were rollers, and when you wanted to reverse underneath a loaded body, the rollers would climb up the chassis and made a smooth action instead of having any sharp edges. Like I say, the rollers rolled up the ramp onto the chassis. You can just see them there on the Bedford, but it's probably better on the Dodge. There we go. Now we'll go back under. Right, so we've reversed under the front of the body. The hydraulic rams have picked up the front of the body. We folded the legs up and secured them with a locking pin. And now we'll reverse fully underneath. So now we're fully under the body. The next stage is to again raise the body with the hydraulic rams so the legs are clear of the ground. So there we go. The body has been lifted up. The rear legs have been lifted up and pinned into position. The twist locks have been applied, so now the body is secure on the chassis. So that's it, ready to go. So what I've done, I've actually made my own wing mirrors. You don't get those in the kit. The indicators were in the kit, only I don't know why they don't have them on that one. Never mind. So I try to again add as much accurate detail as I can. It's the same with the Dodge. I've installed wing mirrors, front lights. Now this cab came from Matchbox. It's not exactly 1/76 scale, it's slightly smaller, but again it's very hard to find a scale cab. If you're making a fleet of vehicles in scale, you have to have them somewhere near correct. So this was the closest I could find, and I think it works okay. Now then, these Bedfords with the demountable bodies were modified tipper chassis, and obviously being shorter than the normal 16-ton flatbed, it avoided any unnecessary modifications. So the tipper chassis was used along with the tipper gearing, which made it incredibly noisy if you were travelling on a motorway. The maximum speed of these was 50 miles an hour. At that speed, the engine was screaming. So a number of the engines went bang, as predictable. So what they did, they bought several of these as an addition to the Bedfords. And these had the Perkins 6 litre or 6.654 turbocharged Perkins diesel. Very, very good. Quieter, smoother, and you could cruise at 60 miles an hour with these. They ran very, very well indeed. Softer suspension, whereas the Bedford, rock hard suspension, noisy, not very comfortable, horrible seating. Anyway, these had an 8-litre engine. Now 8 litres is a big capacity for a 16-ton gross vehicle. I'll just rewind a touch. These were so heavy that they were unable to carry 10 tons. They could only carry 9.5 tons, whereas the Dodge with a lighter chassis could carry the full 10 tons. So anyway, they weren't that successful as a vehicle on the road. Where Bedford got 135 horsepower from, I really don't know. For 8 litres, they were terrible. Anyway, I'm rambling on there. So there we go. That's the Bedford KM in 1/76 scale, and up on the top you have the headboard. Now that was a fiberglass moulding which surrounded the roof there, and you could store what they call a fly sheet, which was held with an elastic strap, and also your sweeping brush went up in there as well. So that's the same on the Dodge. So there we go. That's my story of the Blue Circle Bedford KM. Okay, thank you for watching. Bye now.